The definition of conviction is a firmly held belief. Leadership looks different for each person, but every leader has strong convictions that pave the way for how they guide their people. Whether you're an experienced leader, a current leader, a novice leader, or a soon-to-be leader, this podcast is a must for you. Through this show, you will hear leaders share their convictions, the struggles they face, and the challenges they have overcome by staying true to their convictions. Leadership can be hard and it can be lonely. I aim to connect you with leaders who have walked the journey and want to show others the way. This is Beau Vincent, and you're listening to The Conviction of a Leader. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Conviction of a Leader. I thought that we would start to do some different things at The Conviction of a Leader. We are going to continue to bring you some of the greatest guests of all time. Entrepreneurs, leaders, some in the insurance, some outside of the insurance business. As you know, we don't speak a lot about insurance specifically, more about the leadership side, more about the entrepreneurship side, more about life. So today, I'm going to do a solo episode where I talk about my life, my upbringing, so you get to know a little bit more about me. I've had many listeners, many guests explain to me and ask me why I don't share more about my personal life in my career. So obviously it comes down to the fact that I don't do a lot of solo episodes. So we're going to be adding more solo episodes for the remainder of this year and into next year. We're going to continue to find the greatest guests that we possibly can. And just to remind you, if you know a great guest, message me, email me, text me if you know me, send me their information, connect me with them so I can get them on the show. So we're going to start this journey out that Beau Vincent was born October 4th, 1985 to Brian and Reba Vincent. I was the oldest of four. I have two younger brothers and a younger sister. The craziest thing is that we moved 7 times before high school. My dad was pursuing his career and his dreams within his career. We moved to Indiana when I was around kindergarten, and we stayed there all the way up until high school. My father started his career in a print shop here in Ohio, actually Akron, Ohio. He slowly worked his way from inside the shop to sales outside the shop. And then his sales career started to explode. And a lot of people have told me, and I know just because I know my dad, and I've known my dad, is that a lot of the great traits that my dad had, he passed down to me. Some of them being that he could talk to the CEO or the janitor, and both would respect him, and he would respect them both. And he's taught me some great things about sales and about treating other people and how you should treat your family and lead your family. Now, I know that he struggled later on in life, but he was always up and down. But to be honest with you, the things that he taught me have stuck with me for all of my life. My dad's sales career was starting to explode, and he went from sales at the print shop to car sales to trash sales. And a lot of people say, Beau, what is trash? And what is trash sales? My dad started selling dumpsters, and then he started selling landfill space to bigger companies, and he moved around with this position throughout Ohio and Indiana. And as he grew, he had to move. But there was this time, I want to say, oh man, I could have looked this up before, but his only sibling was having troubles in her life. And it was either the day before my birthday or the day before my birthday is when my dad found out that his sister had passed away. And I remember my dad sitting at the end of my bed. I was in 6th grade, and he woke me up, and he always used to call me Bobo. He said, hey, Bobo. And I could tell something was wrong. And by the way, it was my birthday, but I could tell something wasn't right. And I could tell that he was not all there, maybe emotionally. His eyes were red. And I remember him saying that his sister had passed away. And it was extremely surprise and sudden. And if you know who I'm talking about, my aunt was amazing. She had 3 young kids, same age as me, my brother Dallas, and my brother Dylan, exact same ages and grades. So it was extremely hard for my dad. It was his only sibling, and they were super tight. Their upbringing was full of ups and downs also. Their parents were first-generation Christians, so they had their struggles with everything that they alcohol and whatnot in the beginning of their life, but had turned around and dedicated their life to God and slowly changed, but very religious back then, if you know, a couple generations ago, much different from now. But I learned some of the greatest things from my from my grandparents, Ron and Jerry. And I love them. And my love for the Lord probably started with watching them as a young kid, and then it carried into my mother. So back to this. That major loss was my dad's best friend, only sister. It was a hard decision, but I know my dad made this decision based on multiple things, but mostly because of family. My dad decided to move from Indiana back to Ohio. And when we moved back to Ohio, we moved to Canton, Ohio. I wasn't from there. My parents weren't from there. My mom was from Louisville. My dad was from Akron. Used to call it LA, Lower Akron, but my dad was from Lower Akron. So not sure exactly why they landed on Canton, Ohio, but I could ask them. I could always bring my mom on, which she's been asking me for 2.5 years why I haven't brought her on the podcast. So maybe she'll be a future guest in the upcoming year. So we move, and my cousins become really, really involved into my life, which I love that. I actually got to go to school with my mom's brother's son at Glen Oak High School. So it was extremely cool to go to school with cousins living far away for the first 15 years of my life. Now I'm close to cousins and parents. My dad started a business somewhere around the time I was 16. His sales career was going great, but my dad was phenomenal with his hands. He has a picture memory, which I believe he's passed on a bit of that to me, not the artistic side, but more of the picture memory and how when I see things, I can remember them. I don't always remember what you say, but I remember the things that I see. So my father was a phenomenal artist. My dad could look at things and then draw them. He was great at it, great at painting, great at drawing. He took that into remodeling and building homes. He had done it his whole life with his father. And now that I was 16 and my dad, we had moved to Canton, we're going to stay there. My dad started his own remodeling business. It turned into roofing. It turned into building new homes, and it was thriving. It was doing extremely well. I started to think at this point, I'm later in high school, started to think I'd love to join or take over this business from the sales side and the growth in the business side of the business to help him grow. Because there was times where he had 2-3 jobs or crews working at the same time. And just the business side, I wanted to focus on the sales and the business growth of that. But unfortunately, like most of you know, my dad had some personal problems that have maybe always been there his whole life since I was a kid, and maybe came more out later on in high school. But my father was injured at work because, you know, people that work with their hands in construction, remodeling, and building new homes, they tend to get hurt if they're not careful. And my father got hurt, and then he had to go to the hospital, and then he had a tear in his intestine, and it led to him having painkillers, which led to some addictions and failures in the business. And I think most of you have known that, but that started to shape me in my early 20s. And unfortunately, my younger brothers and sister were much, much younger. My youngest sister is 8 years younger than me. So she had a completely different life than the upbringing that I had, where my parents were extremely stable. Their marriage seemed to be, well, God at the center. So all these things, though, are part of things that have shaped me, being the oldest, having to go through and help lead those within my family. So I picked up a job, I want to say somewhere around the same time. Actually, no. My first job was when I was 13 in Indiana. And it's crazy to think this, but back in the day, and back in my day, when I was done with middle school, 8th grade summer, before I moved back to Ohio, I worked at a McDonald's drive-thru. It was phenomenal. Not only was it amazing, but I had the franchise owner come up to me and say, son, if you keep working like this, you're going to run one of these someday if you keep it up. Obviously, I was excited because I was getting praise. And with some of the things that have happened in my life, I may have seeked earlier in my life, people approving me, or people pleasing, maybe a boss, coach. So this was extremely exciting to me, and it got me excited about being able to go work, and not the income it provided, but more or less providing a good service to the business I worked for or the customers that I provided a service to. So it got me excited. When I moved to Ohio, I was still in sports, but I decided to continue to work. I went from busboy to pizza shop and ice cream shop called Milk and Honey. I loved it. Shout out to Dwayne Cornell, was a phenomenal owner, and his late son, John Cornell, were phenomenal leaders and bosses, owners of the company. They were great. But then as soon as I was old enough to work in the mall, back in the early 2000s, retail was thriving. All I wanted to do was, I was very into fashion at this time. I really liked Jordans and Adidas and Nike. I really liked Abercrombie and Fitch. I liked to dress nice. So I went into the mall, and I was in a class for marketing in high school. Actually, let me back up a step. Miss Everhart was an amazing teacher for marketing. And this was the DECA class. Actually, it was the first time I ever had a teacher. I was more of the class clown, a little bit of ADHD, but loved to make people laugh. And this was the first time I had a teacher give me a compliment that I had a promising future. And she said something along the lines of, you are phenomenal at business and leadership. It just seems to come natural to you. You're never one to shy away from a presentation, communicating in front of the class. And she gave me one of the greatest compliments. So Miss Everhart really inspired me around that 16-year mark. So I decided to ask her to help me find a sales job to increase my experience in business and sales, and hopefully that I could follow in my father's footsteps and be a business owner someday, or take over and work with him. So she took me to the mall, and well, she didn't take me there. She told me to go to the finish line at Canton Center Mall and reach out to one of her connections there. And I did. And I set up an interview. And I went to this interview, and I believe that I did well because I got the job. And I started my journey at finish line at the early age of 16 as a junior in high school. It was exciting, super exciting. And then I was so excited about it because we started A days and B days in school for block days, that I was able to now work on every single B day. Some days I was working 3 full days a week without including nights or weekends. So I was working almost full time in high school already because I was so in love with sales, customer service, and being able to communicate with the public. And that led to many great things. As an insurance agent, I know how important it is to stay on top of your business finances. Cash is the lifeblood of our business, and how you manage your finances impacts your ability to survive and to thrive as an agency owner. That's why I use Club Capital for my business's accounting and CFO advisory services. Club Capital provides business management services to grow your top line and manage your bottom line. Club Capital gives me monthly financial statements so that I have the data I need when making decisions with my Club Capital CFO advisor about my agency. So whether it's hiring a new employee, buying another book of business, or investing more in a marketing initiative, Club Capital helps me model out different scenarios to give me the information and the financial data I need to make the right decision to help my business grow. Click the link in the podcast show notes below, or scan the QR code now to book a free, no obligation financial audit call. Mention the Conviction of a Leader podcast and get your first month of Club Capital free. That's right. Mention the Conviction of a Leader and get your first month of Club Capital services free of charge. Visit the link now to learn more. So more growth came from this. After excelling at Finish Line, I became one of the top salesperson competing with other kids in high school, also adults in college, and some grown-ups. And that led to my desire to sell. Learning that, hey, if people get to like me and I connect with them, they're going to buy from me, they're going to come back, and they're going to become loyal customers of not only our business, but of me. So I love that. And it became a sport to me, selling. I loved it. And this led to me being recruited to another retailer in the mall, which was Abercrombie & Fitch at the time. So I picked up a second job. So I now had 2 jobs in the mall while I was still going to school, still playing tennis. At one point, I was the tennis captain, had 2 jobs at the mall, and was still performing high at both. If I let anything fall, it would have been my schoolwork, because I cared more about the social aspect, working and tennis in sports, than I cared about, and girls at the time, than I cared about my homework. So this led to me helping open the new Hollister in the mall at Belden Village, which was also part of the leadership side that they started to expose me to, which was so great. Then back to the marketing class that I spoke about earlier with Miss Everhart. Miss Everhart pointed me in a direction, because part of the component to this marketing class was a club called DECA. DECA is a network of students across America that compete in categories about business. She saw that I underperformed as a junior because I had a friend and a partner that joined me for the competition. And I did quite well in the communication and presentation side, but there also was a test side, which I scored quite well at. But my partner froze up in the competition and during the presentation. And I think that it negatively impacted our score, so we did not move on from the first competition. So that senior year, she directed me to stick with retail. She said, you're already in retail. Why don't you do the retail category for DECA? So it started out at a district level. And I believe I was first place at the district level. I believe that I was first or second at regional or state. And then I, from there, went to regional. And then from there, I went to nationals, where I placed top 10 out of thousands of kids that originally started, and students that started in this competition at the district level. So to finish top 10 was huge. And not only was it huge, I received a $40,000 scholarship for college. And the college that I chose to go to was Johnson & Wales University in Charlotte. So I decided to go explore this university with my mom and my brother on one of the visiting or tour days. And when I went out there, I fell in love with the campus. It was the first year that this Johnson & Wales campus in Charlotte would be open, for 2004. They had a campus in Miami, and they had a campus for a long time in Rhode Island. They were really well known for originally being a culinary school. For Emeril was one of the largest students that had ever went there. Emeril also was very popular on TV. So when they told me Emerald went there and it was very popular, they also said they are expanding and growing their business program specifically at the Charlotte campus. After I visited their downtown or uptown Charlotte campus, I fell in love. I was walking through the city. It was exactly what I pictured in high school, because at some point in high school, I fell in love with marketing and sales. And I figured at some point I would be leading a marketing firm in New York City, writing commercials for TV shows, radio shows, to attract new customers and attract them. And I think I would have been good at it. I've always seen things from a different angle, but I was excited to do that. So when I went to Charlotte and realized I was accepted to the school, I had a scholarship, and I was going to be able to do business at a private college in Uptown, where you had to wear a collared shirt, you had to shave, and it was just a nice private college. It was next to the Carolina Panthers practice field. They also owned a hotel on campus that was part of one of their business programs for hospitality, which I wasn't doing that. I was going to do business management and marketing, but nonetheless, they had it there. So I thought, I just fell in love with staying on the campus, being in downtown, or what Charlotte people call uptown, the Queen City. So I decided to go there, and I was accepted. And during my senior year, I had some problems with staying away from, trouble. and more or less just being class clown at school and partying too much. I won't get into super details because it's not as important to the story as it is to my journey in sales, entrepreneurship, and leadership. But at this point, I've now started to lead my siblings, my tennis team, my friends. And if you've heard me before, I always like to say, you have to be known, liked, and trusted. And I never knew that growing up. But I did know that as people got to know me, they liked me, and they trusted me, and they started to follow me. So that worked out for me in school, and then in sports, and then in retail, and then in competitions like DECA, which led to me obviously moving to Charlotte. My parents had told me that if I didn't straighten up and actually focus on the right things, that it would lead me down a very rough path very fast. And it was quite sad because I wish I would have listened to them, because I love the school and I love the friends that I created there. I believe my mom said that to me, and I had a really smart ass comment back to her was, just because you guys didn't finish college doesn't mean that I won't. But I ignored her plea or her cry for help for me. And I decided to go to school and continue doing the same things I did, which got much worse there because I went to school, but I slept in the classes because I had early classes, very strict school, very hard. But my scholarship had fine print that I didn't know, which was you had to maintain a certain GPA and you had to maintain in good standing and stay inside of the dorms. Well, by the end of that first year, by 2005, I had failed out because I had fallen below the 2.0, and they took my scholarship. And at the time, I wasn't in any headspace to stay there and rent an apartment in Charlotte and continue on this path at Johnson & Wales University. So I transferred back home, where this was one of the first times, actually maybe the second time I saw my father cry. Saw my dad cry when his sister died, which I talked about earlier. And then I saw my dad cry when I came back because he said something that has stuck with me for a long time. He's like, I told you. And I specifically remember this day. It would have been late winter. We went on a walk in our neighborhood, and I remember him saying he wanted to talk to me. And he said he wouldn't look at me because my dad was not openly emotional. He was an emotional man, but not openly emotional. I remember him looking forward and walking, and he said to me, you've become exactly who I didn't want you to be, which was like me. And it just stuck with me. So much so that I started to turn around my life in this next semester at school. Things didn't get better at Akron U, but I had it in my mind that I was going to change my life, that I wanted to clean things up, that I wanted to become a better man. And as I went throughout this school year at Akron University, I realized that I had become somebody that I didn't want to be. And it was time for me to change my life. So I remember sitting on a bed in my dorm and probably just got done smoking, because I can remember smoke going through the room and dust particles in the air. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed and just crying out to God. And I cried and I said, God, I want to change my life. I would like you to change my life. I want to be a new Christian, a born-again Christian. I want to be born-again virgin, born-again everything. And I asked God to come into my life, and it's when things started to change. And I had just done drugs recently, but I had this great opportunity to join on of a company, factory, that was a union job for steel workers. So my uncle, who had been there, I don't know at the time how long he had been there, let's say 20 years, because he ended up putting in 40 years at this factory, the union factory, which this place had 1,000 people show up for 100 summer internships. And I had to do this long, multiple hour test, cognitive test. And then I had to do an interview, in-person interview. And then we had to do drug tests. Passed all. Then I got to the drug test and I thought that I was smart. I shaved my head. And I took anything you could buy at a store that would help you pass a piss test for drugs. And then I went in for the drug test. And they looked at my shaved head, and I thought I outsmarted them because I actually shaved my armpits too. But I don't know why. I obviously wasn't in a clear mind, but they took hair off of my arm to test the hair, and then they still asked me to pee. So let's pause on that for a second. All during this time, I had started to change my life or allow God to change my life. My wife came back into my life. I met my wife originally when I was 13 at a Christian festival called Alive. While I was living in Indiana, the festival was in Ohio, and our youth group decided to go back and visit this festival every year. Well, I met my wife, and she likes to tell the story because me, my cousin, my brother, we were playing catch with a Frisbee, and we would overthrow Frisbees so that they would go towards girls, and then we'd walk over and we'd try to talk to them. Well, I met my wife at this Alive festival. Actually, my cousin ended up falling in love with her sister, and it was just a high school fling thing, middle school, high school. But long story short is that I met the love of my life. And the craziest part is this, everybody, that when I left Indiana and my father decided to move back to Ohio, we could have moved to Akron, we could have moved to Louisville, but we moved to Canton, which put me in my wife's school district. She's the same exact age as me, so we rekindled a friendship. Actually, I want to say that ICQ or AOL Instant Messenger kept us in touch while I lived in Indiana and Ohio. So when I moved back here, we became friends. We stayed friends. Never dated, never really took it any farther than that until after I came back from Charlotte. My cousin Vince was going to Akron University, and he said, hey, Kristen comes up and hangs out sometimes. Maybe you should, reach out to her and see if she would be interested in going out on a date with you. I know you guys, her and I kind of always liked each other, never really dated, never took it any farther. I always said to her is that you're too good for me. And if I date you now, I'll ruin everything that we could have because I feel like once I start dating you, I'll want to marry you. And that was no short of the truth because we started dating right around that time, right after I asked God to change my life when I was 19 at Akron U. And then all of a sudden my wife comes back into my life and things just start to flourish. And then I go get this job. So back to the job. They call me about the drug test. Guess what happens? And these weren't your, everyday drug that I was, talked into or allowed into my life. But within 30 days I'd been taking drugs or doing drugs for over a year straight and then all of high school. So it was a complete miracle that they said to me that I passed and they were offering me the position. I remember working with my dad on the job site at the exact same time because my dad, like I said, was remodeling and roofing. He had me working with him at this time while I was waiting to hear back on the job. And my dad said to me, he said, that was a miracle. That was a miracle. So I got this job. It was a 6:30 to 2:30 job in a steel mill. And if you know steel mills and factories, it's hot in the summer and it is freezing in the winter. They're like pool barns with no insulation for obvious reasons. Well, I will fast forward this story, but I rose to the top of these manufacturers within the steel, and they were telling me, just like I heard at Finish Line, Abercrombie, and even McDonald's, that I would soon run this factory if I continued on the path I was on. And I was only 19, 20 years old at the time. But I had a major accident, crushed my hand, and decided to go back to school. What I did not say about school is that I was on academic probation when I left Charlotte and went to Akron. And after that year at Akron, I was now suspended, academic suspension for a year. So going to this job, dating my wife at this time, it all came at the right time for me to help change my life, to have structure and a reason to go and move on, which was my wife, which was God, which was my new position. And it paid just enough to get me up at 5 a.m. and into the shop by 6 and ready for work at 6:30. And I was done by 2:30. And at the end of that first 3 months, because I was doing so well, they offered me a full-time position, and it went from temp pay to 100% pay. And to make almost $50,000 a year at 20 years old in 2006 or 5, whatever year it was, is phenomenal. So I decided to stay and continue on this path. Then I had my accident. If you don't have the camera on right now and you're not watching YouTube, I lost my right index finger. I smashed it. And you should go back to season 1. I talked about this in depth about what happened to me with the hand and the injury and what I learned from that. But yeah, I lost my right index finger. So it's been a good joke, and it kind of sets me apart from many other people at this point in my life. So it's been almost 20 years since the accident. So after the accident, I go on a medical leave, finally come back. Things don't work out there. I decide that I want to use my brain and I don't want to use my body and my hands to work. I want to use more of my brain. So I decided to go work in serving, still dating my wife, go back to Kent State. And at the same time, so I'm working in this restaurant. I believe that I've now been going back to school a year and a half, 3 straight semesters. And I serve a district manager from Finish Line, my old position. Well, not my old position, but my old business. And I didn't know this district manager at the time, but actually he was a store manager. His name was Ryan. And I served him, and he was impressed with my communication and the way that I talked to him. And I laughed, and I'm like, okay, you're impressed. I'm just a server out here going to college, just, decided to go back to school. And he said to me, I would love to interview you for store manager in training. And I'm like, what? I'm 21 years old, 20 or 21 years old. I'm serving in a restaurant. I didn't have a degree. And back then, believe it or not, in the early 2000s and 90s, you needed a degree to run any kind of retail store, any kind of store in general. And I remember when I was in high school working at Finish Line, most of the store managers were in their 40s with college degrees, some masters. This wasn't a, fail out of school, go get a job as a manager. Like this wasn't normal. So when he said that to me, I was extremely excited and interested. And I went through interviews with his assistants, his store managers in training. And then I was pushed all the way to the district manager, Marlon Berry, who I've talked about in the past. Marlon interviewed me and he asked me, I'll never forget. He said to me, why do you want this job? Where do you want it to take you? And I said, I'd like to be the CEO someday. I'd like to run this company someday. I said, obviously I'd have to become a store manager, a district manager, and then your position, but I'd love to run the company someday. And he laughed and he said, I've interviewed people for years, maybe 10 years at the time. He said, I've never had anybody tell me that they want to be a store manager in training so they can start on their journey to be CEO of Finish Line. So he chuckled. Long story short, I got the position. This led to some great things. I went into this store manager and training program at Chapel Hill Mall, and I was one of 5 in the position. I want to say there was 20 stores in the district, and they had 16 store managers in training within that district. It took me about 1 year, and within this year, I got married, which was a phenomenal thing. Great thing for my career path. Knowing my wife for as long as I did, I'm trying to think, I'm 39. We got married around 12, this would be 15 years. So I was 24. So 23, maybe I got married. I'll have to check on this math later, but it doesn't matter. The fact is I go through this training program. I'm helping lead the store. It takes about a year. I beat out multiple people within the store and district. They started months before me, but the real truth is this. Maybe I performed equally or almost as good, but the truth is they didn't want the store that was available. They said, I don't want Newtown Mall in New Philadelphia. It was at the time store 17 for Finish Line. I believe they were at 600, 700, 800 stores at the time. This was the 17th store ever built, and it was original in a mall that was 50% occupancy, and it was going downhill fast. The store was extremely small in size. It was 1/5 the size of the store I was coming from in square footage, but also in volume, sales volume, which is how you do pay. So it's around October. I go out to lunch with the district manager, Marlon. He offers me the position. I say yes. I go down to the store with my mom. It's October. I can remember this like yesterday. We got in my car. We drove down. We got some coffee. We walked down to the store. We walked in, acted like we didn't know anybody. But then I saw the store manager, and I knew him because we had went to high school together. He was getting promoted to Columbus, and I was taking his store. But as I walked around, I saw these mirrored walls and slat walls, and I saw drop ceiling. And it was an old rundown store, but it was going to be my store. And I had a lot of pride about that. So my mom and I headed back, and within a short couple weeks, I took over this store in Newtown Mall. And it was a position that was not very big for the district, but it was big for me. And I can remember like yesterday, one thing that we did really good at Finish Line, Marlon and Ryan and a lot of the people that trained me there, they handed me keys to this store when they met me at the store for the first time. And they said, these keys are a store to your business now. And I had a lot of pride about that. And I'll never forget coming in to work my first day alone. I came in super early, maybe 6 a.m. Didn't even need to be in until maybe 8:39. And I threw open the gate, brought it back down, closed it, and I just looked around. And I was so thankful to God that he had provided me with a position as fast as he did, as young as I was at the time, without a college degree, somebody who had failed, had struggles, but other people had seen what God had placed in me for leadership in sales. And I was so thankful to God for Marlon and Ryan and Finish Line and the journey that had brought me back to there and what it provided for me, because I was able to continue to go to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays because I made my own position, a schedule. So I was able to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and still go to school for a while. At some point, it became too much, and our store had struggled in the first couple months. We were struggling. It was our first Christmas, and I was a brand new manager with a staff that was okay. But we were making them better. We were growing them. We were developing them. We had hired new people. And we were down. And I didn't know how I was going to come back. And I wanted to give up. And I remember my dad saying, it's always the darkest before dawn. Don't give up. And this was somewhere in late November, early December. So I didn't give up. Well, we had a stellar finish to the year. And I'm so thankful I didn't give up. And that next year, we were number one in the entire region. So out of the region, if you think 800 stores, there was about 200 in the region, top store in the region, top sales gain, percent sales gain in the region, regional manager, the rookie manager of the year, district rookie manager of the year, which led to my promotion to an amazing store, which a lot of times I still can't believe that I got it so fast. At this point, I was turning 24. And I was being promoted. My wife was having a baby, and I was being promoted to Beechwood Place. And at the time, it was the nicest, still one of the nicest malls in Ohio. It's beautiful, beautiful mall. One of the fastest growing malls in Ohio. And I got promoted and continued on the same path with region and district leading sales, which led to me becoming a store manager trainer. I was now at a point to where I was allowed to hire and train other store managers for our district manager. Well, because we were doing so well, our store got a lot of visitors from corporate. That year we saw 2 different executive visits from all the C-suite, CEO, CFO, CMO, all of them, COO, regional, district, president, vice president, all came twice that year. We had phenomenal visits. But one day, I helped a guest who was actually a secret shopper for Dick's Sporting Goods. He was a district sales manager, and he did everything he could to recruit me and make me feel good. And he asked for my number, and I gave it to him, and he continued to recruit me for a while and stop in. Eventually, I gave in. I took the opportunity to go work at Dick's Sporting Goods and go from a $3-4 million operation to a low 20 to mid 20s, $20 million operation with, 100,000 square foot store and over 100 employees. I was going to be the assistant manager training to be a store manager. I had an department, which was shoes and soft goods, and I was also training to be a store manager. Well, as you can assume, when I went to quit Finish Line, the president, vice president, regional, district were not happy. They did everything they could to keep me. But I remember this like yesterday, and this has shaped me too. One of the regionals said to me, after all we've done for you, after all we've given you, all the awards we've given you, and it really set me off. He had an opportunity to potentially keep me, retain me, but he said the wrong things. He said, I don't understand why you want to stay in Ohio. I've given you opportunities to grow. You could go to Chicago. You could go to other cities, take on district manager and training at a bigger store, but you decide to stay in Ohio. I don't know what's in the water here. And then he says, and on top of that, you're going to leave after all the things we've done for you and given you, And my response was, you gave me the awards, I didn't earn them. You gave me these positions and promotions, I didn't earn them, because I had earned 3 promotions in 3 years. And the way that he said it to me was that they gave them to me. And it really set me off. And maybe it was partially my ego, but I think it was also bad leadership. This is part of what has shaped my leadership. The good journey that I took along the way, where, my district manager and store manager had taught me a lot of great values along the way. And I've learned from my parents and church and the Bible, God, and then bad leadership has also added to that. But those things really stuck with me for a short amount of time. And I decided to go to Dick's Sporting Goods, which also gave me a $10,000 raise, and take that. And I was now working 15 minutes from home versus an hour and 15, sometimes 2 hours in the middle of the winter. So it was an obvious choice. And the growth was huge to now lead 100 employees, be the youngest manager in the whole store, and training to take over a position that paid well into the 6 figures already at early 20s. So my regional at the time lived in Canton, and he would come in and visit me because he had a son that was a stud athlete at football. And he would come into Dick's, which was the main place for cleats and for padding and protection for football. So he'd come in and see me, and I could tell that he would watch me when I was, quote unquote, running the floor. What that means is you're the manager in charge, or manager on duty, and you're in charge of keeping the store in line, front end, back end, stock, shipment, sales, service, all that. And he'd watch me every time he came in. I'd work my butt off, not just when he was there, but especially when he was there. And he decided to recruit me to come back. And he said, if you come back, we're going to put you in the store, which was one of the largest, if not the largest, and it's where I trained at Chapel Hill at the time. I'd be a manager in training, and then I would have an opportunity to be a district manager as long as I was willing to move. So I came back, and we turned around a failing store of over 3 years since I left that store. It had failed 3 straight years of losses. We turned it around in 7 months, and we were gaining in over 6 figures for the first time in over 3 years, which led to me being promoted within 7 months of taking this position. I had already trained and recruited multiple store managers in training. I can remember Mike and Brian and, I'm forgetting people, Mike Hartshorn, Preston, Ian, some great people. Well, I decided to take this promotion to district manager in training in Toledo and take one of the largest now in the entire company. It was almost $7 million a year, which was a huge jump, especially for a mall retail store in the mid to early 2000s. So I took this position, and honestly, it was so great. I learned and met people, many guests along the way of the show, like Amir Oda and his brother Rami, great friends now. I've seen them grow in their entrepreneurial spirit and leadership. Also, I was able to train and recruit over 12 store managers in training in just 18 months. It took me a full 18 months in Toledo to be promoted to a brand new division at Finish Line. I love to coach and consult, and that is why I continue to open up more opportunities and spots for me to work with people like you. If you feel stuck and you need assistance getting past that, if you want to achieve things that you've never achieved in your career and through your business, I would love to speak with you for a free, no obligation phone call to see if we could work together. Because I've worked with over 100 individuals just like you over the last 2.5 years, and I have helped them achieve some of the greatest results of their entire career. And I look forward to working with you. So click on the link below for a free, no obligation consultation with me. Talk to you soon.